Hi, and welcome back to the Seven Thunders video series. We are studying the vision of the little scroll of seven thunders in Revelation 10 because the clock and the key have been sealed within this little scroll for 2,000 years, awaiting the time when the bride of Christ arrives at her midnight hour in age-to-age timekeeping, and that time is now. In the previous video, I divided the vision of Revelation 10 into a first part and a second part. In part 1, John describes the angel. He hears the seven thunders and then seals up what the seven thunders have said. In part 2, the mighty angel takes an oath of allegiance to the creator of the heavens and the earth and the sea, and then declares that the time of waiting is ended. The vision has a third part. In part 3 of this vision, the voice from heaven gives John further instruction. Then the voice that I heard from heaven spoke to me again. Now remember, that voice first spoke about sealing up the seven thunders. Now the voice is speaking again, saying, "Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and the land." So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, "Take it and eat. It will be bitter to your stomach, but sweet as honey in your mouth." So I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. Notice that John was told to go to the angel standing on sea and land. Did John need to symbolically walk from his place in time into the future at the time of the midnight hour to retrieve the scroll from the angel's hand and then consume it? We can assume so, yes. Remember, this is a vision, and we all know about time travel in our dreams and our visions. We can go places very rapidly. We can find ourselves in one place and then suddenly in another. But what makes this scroll taste sweet? And what makes it turn bitter? Anytime we receive revelation from God, it will be indescribably sweet. The bitterness sets in when we attempt to tell others about the revelation. Bitterness is tasted when the revelation is not received by others or dismissed, whether by rejection or indifference or general skepticism that people display when hearing about the divine revelation. Ezekiel would have experienced such bitterness when sharing the vision of a scroll with his people in Babylonian exile. Did they care about the visions Ezekiel shared? Did the visions change anything? John of Patmos would have also experienced the bitterness, knowing that seven thunders wouldn't be heard for another 2,000 years beyond his lifetime. That's a bitter pill. And even though John wrote about the little scroll of seven thunders and has that knowledge, this is a question for us, has that knowledge changed anything over the past 2,000 years? No, because the seven thunders have been sealed. We haven't known what they are. It was a mystery in our scriptures. However, that's John's bitterness. That's the bitterness he has to taste. He had to taste. And that is what God's grieving heart is all about. The idea that God's voice isn't heard. And many people aren't even listening for God's voice because a lesser voice is clamoring loudly 24/7. And the lesser voice is what most of us hear day in, day out. So now it's midnight and God's Spirit is unsealing the seven thunders for the bride of Christ. The delay in hearing the seven thunders has ended, and It's our turn now. It's our turn to eat a scroll. The big question that must be answered is this: are we willing to eat this scroll? Now, there are two major problems facing the Bride of Christ at her midnight hour in age-to-age timekeeping. One, she suffers from the need to be right regarding her ideas about God. And two, she is confused about timekeeping, which hinders the way she approaches the book of Revelation. The Bride of Christ has developed theories regarding time and revelation. To date, each of our theories, the preterist, historicist, futurist, and idealist, have relied on micro 24-hour perception of timekeeping. This means that every currently adopted theory could be valid in some ways while being wildly inaccurate in other ways. To truly understand John's revelation, we must adopt a 2-clock perspective of both micro and macro timekeeping, but we've only had 1 clock, all of us, myself included. And our 1 clock perspective of time has caused all of us to have a blind spot when it comes to interpreting Revelation, as well as our interpretation of the foundational text of Genesis 1. So our collective blind spot has clouded the way we think about our scriptural beginnings, as well as our scriptural endings. But Jesus and John of Patmos would have had a 2-clock perspective of micro 24-hour time and macro age-to-age time, the latter being mathematically perfected by the astronomer Hipparchus 100 years before the birth of Christ. They knew. John and Jesus knew. They had the key of knowledge that the legal scholars weren't openly sharing, as reported in Luke 11:52. That said, our willingness to eat a scroll today depends on our willingness to put aside our theories about Revelation. If we are to come to the vision of the little scroll of 7 thunders as a child, which I suggest we do, we must be willing to let go of the need to be right. It's a hard ask, but let's try. Next up, digesting the 7 thunders. Thanks for listening.